I mean, you had said it, and I personally think this is a great conversation. So I hope the listening audience feels the same way, but it doesn't matter because it's my show.
That's right.
But I'm walking through my audience right now, a 4-week exercise. So I have a community newsletter. I think there's 6,000 last I checked. And it's still amazing to me. I started with 200 and I just, I share stories. I share when I quit. I share, and it's funny talking similar to the podcast. When it's one way, I'll talk to thousands of people are going to download this podcast. I might never hear from anybody for months. I think I'm talking to Russian bots. So I'm like, okay, everyone's dropped off and this ain't nothing but like hackers and bots. As my fiance accused me one day, it was thoughts and bots. So she thinks I'm followed by nothing but thoughts and bots. That being said, I disagree with that sentiment. And, we jumped over it. It's simple. It took me 40 years to figure this out, roughly, maybe 3 decades. But it's you had said your wants and your needs. You had said, Julien, I think you had said earlier, we knew that we made it more than we needed to make. And that's a very difficult conclusion for people to come to, because I remember my first book. When I wrote it, I had a section called, it's probably got the most questions. I actually changed it. It was how to differentiate your budget between wants and needs, like between the 50-30-20 budget. And I think the 30 is wants and the 50 is needs, 30 is wants, 20 for investing. I had more questions. This book's probably 100 some odd pages long around how do I differentiate my wants from my needs? Because if I want it, it's a need. Right. I'm like,
if I want it, I need it.
I had so many arguments with people. I changed the word. So now it's luxuries and needs, which still confuses some people.
Yeah.
All my luxuries are my needs, Marcus.
I know. No, we get that all the time. I hear you.
Say all that to say, either individually or what would you offer people? How do you differentiate a want from a need? Because that's very important. And I underestimated when I first wrote that book, maybe even as I walked through the show. That's very important for somebody who's trying to control their finances. You think every want is a need. You've got some first work to do.
I think it helps to, and I apologize, I cut you off.
No, go for it.
But I think it helps to think beyond things. I think it makes it a lot easier to separate, wants and needs, or luxuries versus needs, when you think beyond things. And for us, it was beyond. It was about thinking about the type of life that we wanted, and I can think of at least 3 things at the time that were primary motivators for me. One was being the type of father that I'd never seen before. I grew up in the 1980s where, man, seeing a father was like seeing a leprechaun. I'm just being honest. Like, we just were not, they weren't there.
It's not funny, but
it's not funny.
The way you said it.
But it was like, oh man, he was like, you ain't seen no father. You ain't seen no father.
What he look like?
What
was he wearing?
Yeah. This is the 1980s in Brooklyn.
That was just a tall boy.
Right. But I just, as I had, we had our first child, our only child, in 2017. And, listen, as cliche as it sounds, my world changed that day. And it was the first day that I realized that as financially savvy as I was, it was the first time I ever thought about parental leave. I realized, you know what? We don't even have that, right? And I had to, again, sacrifice the thing that I valued so much, which was my freedom, my ability to travel the world. I had to use my personal time. I had to use my vacation time. This is almost 10 years being a great employee at this company. And, I had to really think about wow, what was the need for me? And it was it's important for me to be a father, but because I'd limited myself to a degree, granted, I already started to build an exit ramp. It really just brought to light what was really important for me, which is to ultimately have the time and the freedom to do what I want. And now we're at a point where, freedom to me means embracing risk, like diving into it and I want to see what's going on here. What is this world about? What is this subculture about? And it's about living a creative life. I'm not saying that that's what that is for you. Everyone's going to be different. But if I have to choose between the ability to be creative and the ability to drive a Tesla right now, I'm far more interested in the ability to be creative, right? Because that's important to me. That's what makes me feel fulfilled. It helps me use every single part of my brain and my heart. And it's important, especially when I think about the work that we do and the people that we're doing it for, right? So I think that's the work that a lot of people need to think about. It's bigger than just the things, because no matter what it is, you can ask your parents, like, which one of them drove a nice car or a Corvette back in the day. They don't have it anymore. Or you look at it and it looks silly, like, ugh, that was your dream car. It doesn't matter. We're all going to have that experience. We're going to look back at Teslas right now and be like, ugh, that thing look this funny looking, right? That's just how it is. So for me, it was like, all right, well, I don't know that I can say that about amazing experiences, amazing travel experiences, amazing meals that I've had. But again, that's me. So it's beyond just being able to hang nice things on the wall in a nice home and drive a nice car. To me, it's about the freedom to like just be creative.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add a mind. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I will add a mindfulness perspective to that. And there's two questions that really helped me kind of go inside my body and identify whether this was a want or a need. And the first was a question asking myself, what character am I playing in my head right now? What character am I trying to be? Americans, if you grew up in American culture, you have watched a ton of TV. You have consumed a ton of content with made up characters, made up scenarios. And what it creates is a conditioning. You think that that's how it's supposed to go. You learn through the stories of others, thanks to social media, which is still like a 10-year kind of new technology where people are actually telling their own stories. You're hearing from mothers who say motherhood is not like what we saw on the Brady Bunch, and work in or living in New York is not like what we saw on Friends, or living single.
Yeah,
like them.
No one has an apartment.
Nobody
like that,
has an apartment like that. Nobody has a corner office with like floor to ceiling windows, you know, as a high powered lawyer where coffee just like is choreographed into when you're walking in the door. Right. But we have these visions. And so a lot of my thought around what I needed to have at certain ages and stages in my life was based on a character I saw. It's like, oh, I'm trying to be Gabrielle Union again. Like, here I go, trying to be being Mary Jane. Meanwhile, like, I need to be, you know, a less version of myself. Today's content is a little more realistic. We have things like Insecure and Abbott Elementary that are showing, you know, real life trade-offs that people are making, but even that stuff is exaggerated. The second question that I found that was helpful was, what feeling am I chasing right now? Right? Anytime anyone spends money, they're chasing a feeling, whether it is spontaneity or pleasure or wanting to be accepted, power, status, or on the flip side, if you're making more quote unquote responsible choices and you're spending your money to buy stocks or real estate, you might be chasing the feeling of security, of responsibility, whatever it is, you're chasing a feeling. And so being able to practice mindfulness, there's all kinds of apps for the listeners out there who don't know what I'm talking about, that teach you to slow down and observe your thoughts, know what's happening in your body, know when your breath is quickening, to be able to do that enough times to know that in financial purchases, whether it's an impulse purchase or just something you've had, you know, that you see on your Instagram timeline, to know like, what feeling am I chasing determines whether it's a want or a need.
I muted myself for that.
I was like, oops.
Somebody's opening the garage behind me. I'm like, geez, mother. The follow-up question I would have there, I think it's serious. I think it could help. It helped me in a very unfortunate way. Do you think it's also important to check in? I'm not sure if I would say friends, because it might be either a psychologist or therapist or professional, but friends can also help guide you as well. They just tend to want to clown on you as well, at least the ones that so-called friends that I have. But it's important to check in with your friends, because I think sometimes there's a character you think you are, but when you ask your friend, like you pick your show, you say, what character would I be on that show? I think it was Seinfeld for me. They're like, oh yeah, you're Seinfeld. And I was like, all right, I'm a little offended by that. Do you think that's important as well? Because I think sometimes who we think we are is not how we're perceived. And
oh, 100%. Yeah, I remember there was a meme last year that went kind of viral about Broke Bobby. And Broke Bobby had mad money. Like, he was just the brokest among his friends. But like, right. A lot of us were like, wait a minute, am I broke Bobby? Like, what is happening? So I do think, and there's data to support this and research to support this, that a lot of people feel wealthy based on the peer set that they're surrounded by. So if you go to Silicon Valley, this is why, again, your work around cost of living and incomes is so important, because a lot of people who live in Silicon Valley who make, let's say, $10 million a year still feel broke because they know 100 million is possible, or they know 30 million is possible. So I agree that friends and even local demographics can be limiting in that extent. But luckily, there are tools, there is community, there are role models that you can get a wider set of variables to actually compare and decide what's enough for you. Regardless, I know people will always be richer than me, but that don't mean that I'm not rich in my own right? You get to decide that. That's your power. And I think more of us need to take that back. Although social media is trying to slowly drain it from us, more of us need to take back the power to claim I'm rich, I'm good, I'm healthy. Don't matter who has more than me or who disagrees. If I feel that way about my life and can carry myself in a way that supports that, then that's what it is. That's the beauty of America, is that we all get to make up our own stories, right? It's one of the few countries where it's not dictated by I was going to say not dictated by the government, but given what's going on now, in some cases it might be. But you have the freedom to decide what you believe about yourself, and whether it's delusional or nonsensical to other people, it doesn't matter. You get that option.
I'm going to hit two things now because you've made it relevant again. Julien, you were talking about risk earlier, and I heard a great quote from a controversial source. So sometimes people can't hear the message for the source. So I'm not going to say the source, although it is on my motivational videos if you want to check out youtube.com/themarcusgarrett. It's in a world of disruption, people who are not taking risks are the risk takers. Because you talked about the turnover of the CEOs and the people who think, whether by being conservative and follow the status quo, that they're actually going to protect a world that no longer exists. I think the other quote is that a lot of people who have fell out of expertise are, have been canceled these days, or they're experts in a world that no longer exists. So by not taking a risk, you are the risk takers. I was going to say the second plug, I actually reached out to Broke Bobby. Y'all can see he didn't come on the show, so this will be my second plug at Broke Bobby. His invite is still open, but for those who missed that, by the movie magic, I'll get it on the screen. I believe it's actually Forbes. I know it was a viral TikTok, but Broke Bobby made $200,000 a year. Oh yeah. And it was an Excel spreadsheet by this guy who I reached out to for the show, and he was talking about going on vacation. And I remember, I'm an auditor, so I took a look at the spreadsheet. This is why I reached out to him. And it was some people had their vacation was unlimited because they were just so wealthy and rich and independently wealthy. They could take it. And then Broke Bobby had 14 days of PTO, which is somewhere where I fall. And I don't make $200,000 a year. I thought it was fascinating. He got a lot of bad press. He was like, I don't think this is the time for me to shine. So he ultimately, very respectfully, at first he was like, yeah, man, I'm happy to. Then he got a couple more interview requests. I think it went sideways. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna go back into my rich shadows. I don't need this. I'm gonna go take my unlimited vacation. I don't need these poors bragging me down.
Poor broke Bobby.
So I'll reach out to him again. Actually, I'll show him this clip. Let him know that he's still on my mind. See if he will come on the show. Then I'll pivot back to the book here as we kind of move to the wrap here for the unfortunate listening audience. But things I kind of wanted to pull out for the lightning round. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Why the mantra and glitz of quote unquote Black excellence is unsustainable as a motivation for wealth building. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's a big movement, big hashtag.
It is. I've got some complicated points of view on Black excellence, and we only got into a bit of it in the book, but I think it's one of it's a very complicated phrase, and I would say even way of life. But for the most part, I just want people to understand the downsides of it, because really, to me, what I believe it is it's coded perfectionism.
Yes.
And what it is it forces us to sort of subscribe to this idea of endless resiliency. And I'm speaking from personal experience here, right? Going back to what we were saying before about, if you're the first person, I think this is, again, so many Black professionals, you're the first or the only person in your family, you're highly educated, you're going through these microaggressions and frustrations at work. you're not thinking about what the long-term costs or ramifications of that exposure on your mental or physical health will be. You're not thinking about what impact that may have on your ability to raise a child effectively or to be an effective partner. You're also not thinking about how you're subscribing to this idea and continuing to deal with it in the workplace actually contributes to the problem, right? Like you, by not saying something, by turning the other cheek, by always feeling like there's power in, just sort of dealing with it. And unfortunately, a lot of people, deal with it outside of work, and overeating and drug abuse and alcohol abuse and all of those things. And so I just want us as a community to look at that phrase, to look at that way of life and look at it comprehensively, look at the pros and the cons of what it takes to be that, and just also to accept just how impossible of a standard it is. That's certainly something that we experienced. Is something that I know so many people that I know, man. I remember having a conversation with a former work colleague because she found our blog and she wanted to do lunch, and she was like, man, I love what you guys are doing, and this is crazy. Here's what I want to do, man. I want to get into real estate, and here's what I want to get my first property, and then I'm gonna fit that into the next property. And I was like, oh, let's just take a step back here. I was like, what problem are you trying to solve? And really, she just needed like $200 to $300 extra a month. And I was like, why don't you just pay off your car? Just focus on paying off your car.
Right.
She's never thought about it that way. And I was like, it's the same thing, right? Like you can either try to be the person that you've seen on HGTV, or you can just go through a sustained little grind of like, because she made enough money, right? 18 months, she was a mom. She wanted another child. I was like, just pay off your car, right? That's a much simpler way to do it. But I think that there's a cultural layer to it, right? Like we want to be the best. We want to be, do big things. And I totally get that, but I just think we need to look at both sides of that mantra and
compartmentalize it for who we're doing that for. Like a lot of times it gets wasted on these companies and these institutions that don't actually recognize it as excellence and make it your new bar, right? Like now you got to do that all the time. And it's not meant to be the bar or the baseline. It's meant to be this thing to show that we can, but instead it becomes like the new hurdle. And that just leaves so many of us out of the picture, right? If the new bar of Blackness and excellence is a Harvard degree with umpteen years of experience and very specialized knowledge that many of us can't even get in the gate for, that just leaves behind a bunch of other people who are equally as talented and capable, but now can't do it because we've taught the institution that this is the new bar. This is the new baseline. Yeah.
Yeah, and he might listen to the show. I used to caution the staff person, and I'm still friends with him on Facebook. But I used to tell him, he came in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and excited about it. Like the reward for good work is more work.
More work, yes. More work.
Pace yourself. And he came back about 18 months later. He's like, Marcus.
No, but I
tried to outwork him with good work, man. You know what they gave me?
More
work
for the same rate.
We all believe
check don't change.
We're the exception, right? Like we believe. I'll never forget that Will Smith interview. I think he was talking to Tavis Smiley, if I'm not mistaken. He was like, "I'm gonna get on that treadmill.
I'll die on that treadmill.
Look
how that turned out.
I was like, "Damn, why would you? What?" But at the time, my young mind was. I used to repeat. I would channel that energy, too. Right? And I would say, "Oh, I'm gonna. What time they get in the office? 7. I'll be there 6:45." Right? What time y'all leaving? Oh, it's nothing. Why I'm gonna go out there and get in all that traffic? I'm gonna just stay at work. You know what I mean? On vacation, don't matter. I still got bars. I can respond to this email. And it was constant, right? And after a while, you start to see it in fatigue. You get that little, for me, it was back pain. It was a little twitch in the eye. Mm-hmm. I remember, literally, I thought it only happened in movies, but like my back, froze out. And it's like, oh wow, like I'm the character that I saw on TV. And so like there are very real ramifications for that. And even in Japan, there's a term for it, right? I think it's karoshi, right? Like there's a term for that, like death by overwork. And there are really only a couple hours. First of all, let's take a step back. In Japan, there's a term for that. And if I'm not mistaken, if you look at the number of hours that the typical Japanese businessman, that persona works compared to the US, it's really not that different.
It's not much difference.
It's not that different. They're about a 2 or 3 hour difference between the two, right? So what we're experiencing now in terms of overwork and obsession with work, with very little to show for it, has very real ramifications. And I think it's even more real for Black Americans for a number of reasons: health issues, the likelihood that you, as that exceptional person, is going to be responsible for financially supporting a parent sooner than your white peers. So, before you even get into your peak earning years, you're likely going to have to support mommy and daddy, because you're going to find out that the vast majority of them have completely underfunded retirements. And so
you were their biggest investment.
Right? And it just adds more and more pressure, and you've got a choice to make, that you're either going to use that as motivation to work even harder to no end, or you're going to rethink money and your career to make sure that if you do have to support them, if you do have to support yourself and a child and so on, that you're able to do that in a way that does not risk like your health.
I'm going to bring a question back that I was going to drop, and I'm going to tie it into the wrap. And it's 2 comments before we get there. It's funny you say that about the eye twitch. I remember not only I've had multiple since then. I remember the first time my eye started twitching. It's almost when you remember when some tragic event happened. I remember the first time my eye started twitching. I remember the event. I don't remember the date of the year, but I remember I was writing a blog at that time. And this was I'm so old. This is when the internet was kind of, it wasn't what it is right now. Twitter didn't exist. And it was a comment so stupid. so insane and so innocuous, had nothing to do with the post. And I read it multiple times. This person had commented all the time. They're like, this was before I knew what a troll was. I didn't even have the articulate language to describe what they were, but they were trolling. I was like, what is this? I still remember that bit. And then there was another time where my job had me my eye twitching. I was actually joking on the show. They're like, what you gonna do in the other eye twitch? I said, when they both twitch, I'm just gonna close them both. That's it. I'm afraid when they both start twitching, that's the last twitch. So fortunately, not 2 eyes is twitch. It's usually my left. And I'm twitch free right now.
Amen.
I'm telling you.
I'm not at work. I'm twitch free.
I'm telling you right now, somebody is freaking out because it's the first time that they've
connected the eye twitch.
The idea of stress and overstress and overwork and burnout. And even still, I guarantee you they're thinking, oh, well, I'm just,
No, my mama had an eye twitch. It's genetic.
Yeah.
It's like, no,
I'm telling you,
it's stress.
That's stress.
I'm eye twitching right now.
Yeah. And it'll
I
kill
remember
you.
So this was post eye twitch, post secondary eye twitch. So this was eye twitch World War II. And I was in therapy, and I was like, yeah, man, my neck, my back, it's all tense up in here, you know what I'm saying? I had contributed to the gym. I ain't been to the gym in like 3 months. I was like, oh, I must have, wrong workout or something that. And my therapist, she was like, when's the last time you went to the gym? I had to think. My eyes rolled back. She's like, I think that is chronic stress, what you were doing. Yeah. And like you said, that was the first time I had ever connected the dots. I was like, my neck does hurt when I'm at work. A little bit more than when I'm off work. My eye twitch more between 3 and 4 than it ever does between 5 and 9. I'm like,
amazing. Not twitching when I'm having a good time.
Exactly.
And we're joking about it, but this is very real. And I will plug another book that certainly influenced my thinking about how serious and pervasive this issue is. It's called Dying for a Paycheck. I cannot remember the author's name, but that's an unforgettable title, Dying for a Paycheck. And I would encourage anyone who may be underestimating what role working in a corporate environment, because again, listen, a lot of this is also cultural and ties back to American views on what it means to be a man or to be a strong Black woman or whatever it is. Like, you can't be complaining about how hard your little white collar job is. Yeah, well, listen, it is pervasive, right?
It's psychological.
And let's just take that a step further. Your parents might even contribute to you complaining or disregarding it because they work blue collar jobs, but that doesn't make the pain or the discomfort or the stress or the potential consequences any less real. But that doctor who wrote that book, I believe he's a professor at one of them schools in California. I believe it's Stanford. Dying for a Paycheck was when it really opened my eyes and helped me to think about the long-term ramifications, not just of overwork in my own home, but our community as a whole. And I think that's one of the reasons why we really wanted to zero in on this idea of Black excellence, because it is in many ways, I think, contributing to it. We are convincing ourselves that we shouldn't complain because this idea that constant excellence is the bar, even though, and you post this stuff too, like it ain't showing up in our net worth. So
Right.
we must have to ask ourselves, like, what are we going to do differently?
I could continue this all day. So I'm going to kick it to the wrap, and I am going to ask my question because I actually think it might be a lighter note to end on. So the wrap is made possible by our partners like Personal Finance Club. Personal Finance Club teaches you how to build wealth with index fund. It's the investing course you should have learned in school but didn't. Visit themarcusgarrett.com to learn more or find a direct link in your show notes. The question I kept trying to get back to, and from your book, actually, so I think is a good end here, and then you can let them know where to find you around the interwebs, is how to talk about money with your loved ones without coming to blows. I think we naturally got there. What advice or insights would you have?
We offer several tips in the book, but my favorite tip is around dropping the labels. Like typically in situations with loved ones, you always want to label someone as the spender or the saver, or good with money or bad with money, or whatever it is. But the reality, it goes back to a point that I said earlier. Every time somebody spends something, they're chasing a feeling. What you're seeing is that the feelings that you chase with your money are different from the feelings that the other person chases with their money. But the goal is to get to that part of the conversation so that you can actually come up with a creative solution, hopefully one that is less expensive or in the direction that you're trying to get them to go to, so that you can actually come up with a solution that meets you in the middle, right? You're not going to convince them that their feelings aren't valid or that the way that they use the money as a tool in their life isn't valid for them. But if you acknowledge that there are other ways to accomplish that same core feeling, you might get a little more productive along the way of like getting them to do something different with their money.
Yeah, it makes me think of LeBron James. Actually, he's got this, him and Mav Carter, I think they've got this brand called More Than an Athlete. And I think it's a great parallel, right? Because I think what they're saying there is like, there's more to me. This idea that I should just be this one thing that whoever has defined me as. I think couples do that all the time, right? And it's because of how pervasive and convenient those labels are. I'm the spender or the saver. She's the other. I'm the good one. She's the bad one. Help me fix her. You know what I'm saying? But I think there's another really important part to this with respect to money in relationships. And I'm drawing a blank. What is my other point? Come on, brain. What's the big one? Oh, I think the other really important point with respect to money and relationships is helping people to realize that the absence of conflict is not a marker of success in your relationship. I think so many people feel like, man, we had an argument about money. That must mean we're not on the same page. I'm like, take it from someone who has been around the handle, or whatever the old country saying is. A couple.
Been around the cup long enough to find the handle.
My brain refuses to accept that. You know, that conflict is a sign of growth, right? Like, you know, there are conversations that if you don't have a child that you just have not had, right? If you're not supporting a parent financially, there are a whole set of conversations and situations and financial products that you haven't even thought about because you're not in that scenario, right? And so I think it's natural if two people are at a point in their lives for the very first time, they're being forced to deal with the situation and make really difficult choices, which is what most families, black, white, doesn't matter, are forced to deal with. That naturally leads to conflict. So long as you can have respectful dialogue, that's fine. But the absence of conflict, I think, is actually more of a sign of avoidance, or y'all aren't growing. You're not doing anything different, which is why you're not experiencing any friction, and there's no real reason for you to do that. Now, of course, there's going to be the random couples out there.
Insert disclaimer. We don't argue ever.
Finish each other's sentences and all of that stuff. Sure. Those people are, outliers. But for everybody else who's normal and doesn't wake up smiling and happy to see the other person, it's a little too personal. But I think you get my point.
I do. I'm gonna go ahead and save you while you are behind.
Yeah.
We can wrap it up there. I'm also going with no comment, so you can see I'm sorry. Got my mic on mute. Just
okay, Mr. Thoughts and Bots. I'm gonna let you know.
I got nothing to say, nothing to add. That book again is Cashing Out. That book again is Cashing Out: Win the Wealth Game by Walking Away. Please tell them where they can find you on the social media.
Yes, Cashing Out is available in stores where books are sold June 14th. And you can find us on social media at richandregular.com or We have the handle Rich and Regular on all the socials except for TikTok. We not TikToking yet. But Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, please holler at us.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, man. It's always cool to connect.
So, this will be the end right here.